Hey there. Welcome to episode 72 of Toy Talk with Mike and Chad.
I'm Mike.
I'm Chad, and the toys we'll be talking about today are some of Mike's most recent Marvel Legend toys.
Yep. It wasn't too long ago that I did a video where I showed off all my new Marvel Legends. I had Ghost Rider, I had Death's Head, and I got all up to speed. But then a whole new wave of Marvel Legends hit right afterwards. So I've got 7 figures from that new wave of figures, plus a couple other odds and ends that showed up. So time for another Marvel Legends video.
Let's dive in.
Now, I know you buy a little bit of Marvel Legends. You haven't got anything new?
Nothing new, no.
Right.
In my pile of loot that I was telling you about, I do have another Wolverine coming.
Another Wolverine?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one is this?
I have to look them up. I forget the exact.
Now, we're shooting this the same weekend as New York Comic Con. There wasn't a ton of Marvel news to come out of Comic Con, but they did reveal a new Sentinel. Did you see that?
I did. He is 2 feet tall?
Yeah, 24 inches. And I don't know. I'm actually considering it.
I did too.
Now, the thing is, like, it's one of those things, we talked about this a little bit in our... we just earlier tonight shot a video on G.I. Joe figures, which I would have posted previously. So if you want to see our last video on G.I. Joes, go look that up on my channel. But anyway, in that one we talked about, like, there was a new retro-carded Dr. Mindbender, which you're a little frustrated by because you paid premium prices for the old version, which was like an exclusive. And if you had known they were going to re-release the same figure on a retro card later, you wouldn't have spent all that money on it. And it always sucks to kind of get burned by a toy being re-released. And, it's nobody's fault, really. The toy companies don't owe us anything not to release a toy again or something. But anyway, what Wolverine did you find?
So I actually have 2 Marvel Legends coming.
Okay.
The first one is the Astonishing X-Men Marvel Legends Wolverine.
Okay.
And the next one is the Silver Surfer comic Marvel Legends Silver Surfer.
Okay.
The repaint of...
Yeah, one I've got up there.
The re-release, I guess, yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that Wolverine looks super cool. But
anyway, so with their Sentinel, because a couple of years ago, Hasbro did a HasLab, which is like a crowdfunded, for a 2-foot Sentinel. And, they always make clear with these HasLabs, like, this is your only opportunity to get this figure. We're not going to put it out at retail. We're not going to re-release it. So if you want this Sentinel, this is your only chance. And the Sentinel, he was, I don't know how much he was. He was way too expensive for a Canadian because with the conversion rate and the shipping, he was going to cost us close to $600, I think. So if you're an American, I'm going to say he was maybe a $400 figure. That might be close, maybe $450. I don't know. But yeah, he was big. He was expensive. Now this Sentinel is probably about half that price. He's, I think, Canadian. I saw somebody post that because they offer free shipping now for orders over $100. So with the conversion and the free shipping, I think to get it to Canada, it's like $240. So to go down from $600 to $240. Now, mind you, the figure is less detailed because it's modeled off after the X-Men cartoon. So, like the other cartoon figures, the paint apps are much flatter, and they didn't put a lot of paint wash to bring out details because it's supposed to look like the animation. But honestly, there's probably a lot of people that liked these Sentinels from the X-Men cartoons that didn't think we'd ever get a 2-foot cartoon-specific Sentinel, so they bought the other Sentinel for like $600, and now they're like, oh, I could get this one for like $200? And, like, I'm glad I didn't buy the other one. I do think the other one looks better. I think it was more articulated. Like, on the other one, every single finger was articulated like 2 or 3 times, like it moved like a human hand. This one, I don't think has that level of detail, but I don't need it to. I thought that was kind of overkill anyway. So, and it also comes with fewer accessories and all that. But yeah, if I can get a Sentinel that's 2 feet tall to put with my Marvel Legends for $240 as opposed to $600, I think that's pretty tempting. So I have a month to decide if I want to do that. But I do feel bad for the people that feel burned by that.
Well, it's like you and the Hasbro sale. where you've purchased a lot of figures, and then near the end of the year they're like, hey, let's put these at like 60% off, and it's like, really?
Yeah, that always kind of sucks when things you bought at full price go on sale. That's always tough with toy collecting because you never know if something that you want is going to get sold out and you'll never find it again, or if it's going to go on for half price. There was one particular case, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, but I collect Marvel Legends, I collect G.I. Joe Classified, I collect Transformers, I collect a lot of Hasbro brands. And Hasbro had, like, in December, they had like a 60% off sale. And I think I counted there was like 40 toys I had bought that year that were all for sale for 60% off or something ridiculous like that. And I was like, oh my God, that's hundreds of dollars. And it's like, ugh. And I have been a little choosier. People that follow this channel wouldn't think so because I still buy way too many toys. But I have become a little more choosy. Like, for example, there was a recent wave of Iron Man figures that came out this year with Count Nefaria. I like Count Nefaria. He's not like a must-have character for me, but it's the first time that character has ever had a toy. I always like expanding my Marvel Universe with new characters and not just another version of Spider-Man all the time. So Count Nefaria is a character I want, but I kind of gambled and thought, he's probably not that popular. He's the kind of character that I think might show up for 60% off at some point down the road. Now, mind you, maybe they made fewer versions of him because they knew he wasn't that popular, and maybe he'll sell out, and maybe I'll end up paying $60 for him on eBay. But I took a gamble with him, and I do that a lot more now with characters that, yeah. So, I don't know. You win some, you lose some. Anyway, let's talk about the toys that I do have in hand. Now I'll talk about the full wave of figures first, I guess. And this kind of goes into that other conversation because there was another full wave of figures that I bought earlier this year. Now, a lot of times I don't buy the full wave of figures anymore, but when there's a Build-A-Figure, obviously that whole marketing ploy is to get you to buy all the figures, maybe even figures you wouldn't have bought. So the previous wave was Zabu, the Build-A-Figure. And there was a couple characters in that wave I legit wanted. I would have bought them whether they came with a Build-A-Figure piece or not. But the two that weren't necessary for me was like Cable was one of them. So I was like, I'll wait on Cable. I'll get him later. He'll probably be on sale down the road. And so I'll just have to have a Zabu missing a leg until I eventually get that Cable. But then Cable was sold out on every website, and people were freaking out. Apparently, that was the character everybody else wanted the most in that whole wave of figures, and he was selling for 2-3 times his original price on eBay. And I was like, God damn it! I'm like, all I want is the leg that he comes packaged with. I don't even want that Cable. But in order to get that leg, I ended up paying for that Cable, and I paid a premium price for him. Not that premium, but definitely more than I paid.
Enough that it hurts.
Yeah, because all the other figures I ordered from GameStop, where I get a 15% discount, I paid like comic shop prices for Cable. And so the figures that I was hoping to get for the cheapest, I paid the most for.
Well, you ended up being happy with that Cable anyway, didn't you?
He's fine, but I still don't need him.
Yeah.
But it just backfired on me by not completing my Build-A-Figure. So this wave here, I would have bought, I think, 3 of these figures out of the 6. I felt forced to buy the other 3 in order to build my Build-A-Figure. And I could have maybe waited and said maybe I can get those other 3 on sale later and I'll have half of the Build-A-Figure until then. But I didn't want to run into that situation where a character surprises me and becomes really hot and sells out, and I can't. And I don't want to be stuck with a Build-A-Figure missing one arm or one leg or a head or whatever. So I just pulled the trigger and I said I'm going to order the whole wave. I ordered it from GameStop, which is the cheapest option for me because I get it at a discount. So it was the best it was going to go, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this year or maybe even a couple months into next year, all these figures are marked down on Hasbro's website or something, and I'll maybe be kicking myself, but what can you do? All right, so this wave kind of had an overarching theme called Strange Tales. They came in the new style box for Marvel Legends. They've changed up the packaging for Marvel Legends a few times over the years, but these are fully rectangular boxes, and there's no weird angles on them, so you can, if you're an inbox collector, they can be stacked or dicely, which is good, I guess. But all right, so let's start with. I'll start with the character I wanted the least.
Okay.
So this here is Dr. Voodoo. I would not have bought this figure if I didn't have to get the Build-A-Figure piece with him. Not that it's a bad figure per se. I just didn't want him. There you go. So there's Dr. Voodoo. Any thoughts?
I don't like him. I don't know anything about him. I don't like him. Just looking at him.
So the thing with him is, I've been reading comic books since the mid '80s. I don't have a lot of appearances with this guy in it. He's never really been able to maintain his own book or anything. He just kind of shows up, as a guest star here and there. But I grew up knowing him as Brother Voodoo. That was his name. He had short hair, and he had like kind of a bare chest and bare feet. He was a superhero that kind of came out of voodoo culture and stuff. And he's a fine character. I would happily have bought a Brother Voodoo figure, but they've never released one. But a couple of years ago in the comic books, Doctor Strange, I think he died. I can't remember. He died again recently, but he dies all the time. Anyway, I think Doctor Strange was either dead or retired or whatever he was doing. And so he gave up being the Sorcerer Supreme. And so he gave like the Eye of Agamotto and all that stuff over to Brother Voodoo. And Brother Voodoo became Dr. Voodoo. And this is when he got his new look with the red cape and the dreadlocks and all that stuff. So he got this whole new vibe, which I didn't like as much as the Brother Voodoo look. Anyway, but I bought this Dr. Voodoo figure a couple of years ago, just because I don't have a Brother Voodoo, and I didn't have a previous Dr. Voodoo, so I thought, well, you know what? I don't mind this character, so I'll add him to my collection, so I have him there. He's represented. And I definitely didn't need another version of him. This new version is an upgrade. I think he's got a better build. I think he's got a better head, a better cape. Like, everything about him is better, but he's just not a character I even really cared about. And it's the same costume. All it is an improvement of the other figure. Whereas if they had said, you know what, we already gave the fans a Dr. Voodoo, how about we go back and give them an old school looking Brother Voodoo? I could have got behind that. I could have been excited. But to get a slightly better Dr. Voodoo than the one I already have just felt like a waste of money to me. So,
yeah, I can see why you were least excited about this guy. He's pretty boring.
Yeah, like, he's not, in my mind, a great character to begin with, and it's way too similar to the previous version. Like I said, he's an improvement. This guy has, he's got pinless joints. He's got the makeup on his face that guy doesn't have. But even his accessories, the exact same. He's got this rod with these spirits coming out of it or something. And they changed the color from blue to purple on the new stick. But anyway, so...
I mean, I'm a big cape guy, so I do appreciate his tattered cape a bit more.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the same cape that came on Hobgoblin or something. But this here, I think, is a unique cape. It's got a nice texture to it.
Yeah, it's also longer.
I like this thing here is even his belt, I think, is better. It's a nicer color, and he's got these extra little skulls on the side, which I don't think that one has. Yeah, he does have that. Okay, maybe that's the same piece. I'm not entirely sure. But even if the costume is just slightly different, but it's the same costume. So, yeah. Now, mind you, I do upgrade characters even if they're in the same costume if it's one of my favorites. Like, when they make a better Spider-Man than the previous one, I'm like, well, he's Spider-Man. I want to have the best possible Spider-Man. Dr. Voodoo, I don't need the best possible Dr. Voodoo. So that's him. Here's another one I'm not excited about. She's not a bad figure per se. But you know who that is?
Looks like Storm.
That's Storm.
That's a terrible looking Storm.
They call her Bloodstorm because she's a vampire. Vampire Storm. And again, I don't think it's bad, but it's too specific of a thing. I don't need it. I like Storm as a character. They have done lots of nice Storm figures in the past. I think Storm might have made my best of the year list years ago when they first released her first appearance Marvel Legend. Beautiful figure. Then they released a decent figure from the X-Men animated line a couple of years ago. Plus, I already have Mohawk Storm from this era when she wore a leather jacket and a mohawk. And I thought this was a cool figure. And it was when she had this look that she got turned into a vampire and became Bloodstorm. And that's what that figure is. So I already have this figure, so it kind of falls into the same camp as Dr. Voodoo there. And it's like, I really didn't need, like, sure, that one's got red eyes and her mohawk is slicked back. But otherwise, it's basically the same figure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of this one more than Bloodstorm.
Yeah. Now, the one saving grace with this figure for me is that there was a comic book series way back in the day called Mutant X, where Havoc from the X-Men got sucked into an alternate reality, and they thought he was dead in the main Marvel universe, but really he met alternate versions of the X-Men and started his own X-Men team in that alternate universe. And in that universe, Storm went by the name Bloodstorm, and she was a vampire.
Yeah.
So for that reason, this isn't just this Storm turned into a vampire as a temporary thing that happened in a couple of issues, then she got fixed. This is an alternate Storm from an alternate universe. So in my little headcanon that I need to have a justification for all the toys I have in my collection.
Yep.
I'm like, well, this is her from an alternate universe. It's like Spider-Man in the multiverse. She could come over from her universe technically, and these two could interact. And it makes her seem a little less unnecessary. So she's an okay figure, but nothing to get too excited about. The next one that I probably wouldn't have bought, maybe, because at least I like this character. He's actually one of my favorite Marvel characters, is Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight is very cool. I have previously this version of Moon Knight, which is a more contemporary look for him, where he's got this mostly black outfit with some white armor pieces. Pretty cool. Then they released this more classic all-white Moon Knight. Then they released one for the MCU version, which I didn't buy. I was kind of tempted to.
Off the Disney Plus show?
Yeah, off the Disney Plus show. It was kind of a cool look because it was similar to these, but he looked more like a mummy. It was wrappings instead of just like spandex. But I did buy... did you watch that show, by the way?
Yep.
Like, he has one of his personalities wears like a white suit.
Yep.
So I did buy the suited version. So I also have that version of Moon Knight. So I have 3 versions of Moon Knight in my collection. This version here is of Moon Knight from a specific point in time. He wore this outfit during one of his like 80s miniseries where he had these gold bands around his wrist and ankles. I have an old comic book, which was, I think, the first issue of the miniseries, where he's got the gold bands and he's holding this, was it Ankh? Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
And so he's holding this gold Ankh on the cover, and it was actually a really cool image. So, you know what? If I found this figure on sale, I might have bought it, even if it didn't come with the Build-A-Figure piece, just because it's a slightly different Moon Knight from my other versions, and it's evocative of a specific piece of artwork that I like. But it's mostly the same as like this guy here.
I mean, it's not terrible. It looks like a nice enough upgrade, and where it's from like a specific thing again.
Yeah.
It's worth adding to your collection where you're a fan.
And it's the first, like, he's pinless, which again, you and me have talked, we don't really care about that much, but like the old Moon Knights, you can see like the pins in their joints. This guy here, there's no pins. That's like something nice and new. I
do like his...
Yeah, like, it's not a bad figure. It's just, when you already have 3 Moon Knights, and it's not like this look is really that different. They gave him some new bracelets and stuff. And you're like, do I really need this for almost $40? Probably not. But to get the Build-A-Figure, I had to do it.
You have to.
And now we'll get into the figures that I would have bought. But the problem is, even with these, they're not like the best figures. Like this here is Daimon Hellstrom, the son of Satan. So this is another guy that's been around for a long time. Like, I don't know if it's all the way back to the 60s, maybe the early 70s. He's never really maintained his own book, but he shows up as a guest star in a lot of things, like Ghost Riders and some of the more supernatural stories. I never thought we'd really get a Daimon Hellstrom before, partly because he's the son of Satan, and that's the kind of thing you can't really put on a package at Walmart. But
not with that attitude.
But like, we got him. I think it's cool. This is the look, like his most iconic look. There's been times when he was bald with a black goatee and stuff, which I didn't care for. Like, this is the look. His kind of more classic look. But he's just kind of boring.
Yeah, I don't know too much about this character. I don't have much to say. It's just some dude wearing pants holding a trident and a pentagram on his...
Yeah. But that's just all he is. It's the same as like with Namor the Submariner. It's like he's basically a guy in a Speedo. Like, you can't really do much more, but that's his most iconic outfit. Like, I wouldn't have wanted them to go crazy giving him a spiky outfit. Like, I'm sure he's worn different things over the years, but this is the look I'm most familiar with for him, so I guess it's the toy I would have wanted, but it's just, he's barefoot, he's shirtless, he's basically just got some yoga pants on and, a trident.
And some really, really weird nipples. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't really focused on his nipples, but...
just like lots of paint.
Yeah, would you have wanted them sculpted so you could run your finger along them?
No, but no, but I think it just looks like he's got this massive pentagram on his chest, and then you have these two little pink circular nipples right there.
That's what nipples are, dude.
I know that, but
that's what I bring Chad along here for, so he can critique all the nipples of my toys.
Or the butts.
Yeah. So I think you'll have another opportunity for nipples here in a minute.
Amazing.
I
mean, I was looking at that Bloodstorm, like, God damn.
Yeah, I think no luck there, I don't think.
No.
So this one here is a character I would have bought. I was looking forward to it. The problem with this one is I just think it kind of misses the mark for a figure. So this here is Lilith. She is I think the Queen of Goblins or something is like her moniker. She's a character that first appeared in the 90s Ghost Rider comic books, and she kind of became the big bad in those comic books. So I remember her from back in the day. And as I think you're aware, I recently bought a big lot of old 90s Ghost Rider comic books to fill in some holes in my collection, because I only collected it up to about issue 35, and now I'm reading some of the other issues from the run. And so I'm revisiting Lilith for the first time since I was a kid. And so it's kind of fun to like be reading her early appearances and get a new toy of her right at the same time. It seemed very good timing for that. But I just think this toy, again, is kind of boring. Like, I don't know what they should have done differently, but like her hair is this translucent. She never really had hair. It was always like this crackling energy that coming out of her weird shaped head. But it just kind of lays there kind of flat and doesn't look very dynamic. She's got this cape, which is just this little scrawny little cape that plugs into her back and like just isn't very dynamic. Like, her boots and her outfit, like she's got this big deep neck on her shirt and she's got these high boots, but there's not even like a sculpted line for her boots. So these could have been the same legs and body they used for somebody that just wore a full spandex, and they just painted the details on. And so it just feels like a little cheap for a figure in this day and age. Because in our last Marvel Legends video, I commented about how they've really been knocking it out of the park on their Sharon Carter figure and their new Captain Marvel figure. Like, the women figures, they've really been upping their game. And then to get this one, it feels like a figure from like 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's a step backwards.
Yeah. Still has the pinless joints and double joints and all that sort of stuff, but just meh.
Yeah, she's okay. Probably, I don't know too much about her. I know of her.
From like the trading cards or something?
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah. Yeah,
that's probably not something I would have picked up.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing like I would have wanted, but then if I saw her in the store, I might have been like, oh.
Hard pass.
Well, not a hard pass, because she is a character that's never had a toy before. as a huge Marvel junkie, I do just like having representation of characters on my shelf. But I would have been disappointed. I'm like, oh, she looks like they kind of cheaped out on her. So yeah. So far the two figures that I would have wanted, they're both a little bit disappointing.
Well, the color scheme on the boots too is just a drab gray.
Yeah. So here's the last one. Now, mind you, there was a seventh figure in this series that I didn't buy because he didn't come with part of the Build-A-Figure piece. A lot of these waves of Build-A-Figure figures, they always give you one extra figure that you can buy if you want. And fortunately, it's often a character that's been done a million times. And I think maybe Hasbro's actually throwing you a bone by saying you don't need to buy this extra Iron Man if you don't want to, because you probably already have 30 of them at home. So in this case, it was Wolverine. It was the Helverine. Have you seen that?
Yep.
So it's a recent idea. They just did a mini series. I think it's still being published right now. But Wolverine became Ghost Rider, which is kind of a unique look because when people become Ghost Rider, their skin melts off and their skull catches on fire. But Wolverine's got a metal skeleton, so he's got the adamantium silver skull with the flames, and his claws are on fire. It's kind of a cool look. But one thing that kind of turns me off about it, and maybe I would understand this if I read the comic books, but I haven't, is he still has his hairy human arms. So he's got an exposed skull, but he's still got flesh arms. So, like, just if that Wolverine stripped naked, would he just be a skull on a muscly guy body? It's just
with hairy arms.
Because even though, like, Ghost Rider wears a leather jacket so you don't see his body, it's happened plenty of times where his jacket got torn off and he's just a skeleton under his jacket. So maybe they're saying that Wolverine's healing factor makes the skin grow back on it, but then why doesn't it grow back on his head as well? Like, it just looks a little weird to me to have a skull head with exposed flesh arms. If he had a long sleeve shirt, it wouldn't bother me, but anyway, so I passed on Helverine. So the last figure I got in this set, do you know who this guy is?
He looks like some form of Thor.
This is Vlad Dracula.
Oh, okay.
So Dracula...
Talk vampires to me.
He's in the public domain.
Yeah.
So he shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
And Marvel has had a Dracula for decades. He had a pretty long-running comic book called The Tomb of Dracula in like the 1970s. But that Dracula always looked more like the classic movie Dracula, like long black cape, black, like well-dressed black suit, slick back black hair. At some point along the way, he got this look. I don't have the issue when he switched to this look. I have some comics with him since he got this new version. Like, for example, they just did a big vampire-themed crossover called Blood Hunt, in which Dracula was a part of it. There was a run during Jason Aaron and Ed McGuinness's Avengers run where Dracula was a part of it. And again, he kind of had a look that, not quite this, I think, but similar. So yeah, somewhere along the way, it looks like Marvel said, let's make Dracula, at least our version of Dracula, more unique to us rather than just like something we lifted out of the Christopher Lee movies or something. Yep. So I'm happy that I'm getting Dracula. There is a part of me that kind of wishes he looked like his classic 70s movie Dracula, because that's the Dracula that I grew up reading in the comic books. And I kind of always prefer the 80s looks to the more contemporary looks. Sometimes it's cool to get the contemporary looks as well, but not at the expense of a classic. So same with Dr. Voodoo. Like, I don't mind having a Dr. Voodoo, but I would rather have a Brother Voodoo. And this Dracula is kind of cool, and he's a little bit more unique, but I still kind of wish I had the Tomb of Dracula look. But I do like this guy. His armor with the red kind of layered armor, it kind of reminds me of, it's a bit of a stretch, but the armor that he wore in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
He had that red kind of plated armor that looked like muscle tissue. So yeah, he's got this red armor. He's got this black cape that's all tattered. He's got a sword. He has two heads. So I've got him with his more neutral expression head, but he has one that's kind of more of a where you can see his fangs. Yeah. Which I have a whole bag of accessories here that go with all these figures that I'm talking about here. So, like Bloodstorm, for example, she also had a vampire face.
Yeah, I like this face a lot better.
And sorry for the rustling here. There's Dracula's more angry face.
I'd probably display with this one. I know you like your neutral faces.
I prefer neutral faces on my shelf generally. And yeah, otherwise, there's not a whole lot worth showing you in here because it's a lot of extra hands. And like Moon Knight, for example, he came with his staff. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of standard stuff. Some power effects and whatever. But anyway, so that was the Build-A-Figure wave. And I bought all those lackluster figures to get the Build-A-Figure. And if I'm being 100% honest, even the Build-A-Figure was a little bit of a letdown compared to what I was expecting. So this here is one of my earliest Marvel Legends. When they first started making Marvel Legends, and actually it was Toy Biz, and then Hasbro took it over from them. I actually can't remember if this is a Hasbro or a Toy Biz. It might be so old that it's actually Toy Biz. I don't see it anywhere. But anyway, I bought this figure, even though I really wasn't buying Marvel Legends at the time. Because I was like, man, I don't know if I'll ever get a figure of this guy ever again. And I like this character a lot. You know who this dude is? So this is Blackheart. If you knew him, I would have thought maybe it would have been from the Capcom games. Because he was in the Marvel Capcom.
Versus Capcom. Okay.
So yeah, he was this black spiky guy.
Interesting.
So even though that other character we talked about earlier, Daimon Hellstrom, is the son of Satan, this is the, I guess, actual son of Satan. Because there's other demons in, like, there's different levels of devils or whatever in the Marvel Universe. And the main devil that everybody knows is Mephisto. Yeah. Hellstrom is not Mephisto's son. He's a son of some other devil, whatever. Blackheart is Mephisto's actual son.
Okay.
He first appeared in Daredevil comic books of all places, which was a little kind of odd for him. But John Romita Jr. was drawing Daredevil at the time, and I was collecting it. This is back in the 80s. And when they introduced Blackheart, I just thought he was the coolest looking thing because he was the way John Romita has very stylized art. This thing was basically a big living scribble. How it was just, he was black and the spikes coming off him. He was it was kind of hard to decipher what exactly was going on with him. And this figure actually does a pretty good job of like representing Blackheart. But what I didn't like about old Marvel Legends and why I didn't really collect them until years later is because they were just way too spindly. They always gave them articulated toes and articulated fingers. And I just found they ended up looking way too just gangly and weird. And this guy suffers from that. Like, you can't stand him on your shelf because he's got multiple articulation in his ankles and his toes. And so his feet are really like loose and he just can't hold his own weight. Plus this tail, he's got this bendy wire tail that you can move, but it just protrudes outward from his like butt piece. And it's like, it takes up a lot of room. Even when you bend it, like, he needs a lot of clearance behind him on the shelf. So it never really worked for me. And so even though I have hundreds and hundreds of Marvel Legends that I started collecting really in 2014, which this figure predates, I think this guy's maybe 2009. This guy has never been on display. He's been in a bin just because I never felt like he really fit in with my current Marvel Legends. So anyway, this new Build-A-Figure was an update of Blackheart. And I was like, finally, I can put a Blackheart on my shelf. So here he is. And he's cool. But he still has some of the same problems. Like, I find, and Blackheart does have weird, he has like kind of almost horse-shaped legs, the way, like a centaur or a fawn or, whatever those guys. So it makes him a little difficult to stand. And he still has the same rubbery wire tail, which I almost wish it was a separate piece that you had to snap on, because then you could turn it. But it's part of his sculpted butt, and Anyway, there you go. Like, I think he looks
I mean, he's
cool.
not terrible. Yeah, I definitely think it's an improvement over the other one you have, but like that's super annoying with the why not just give him a flat foot?
Yeah, and like I like that head design. I like the way his like
Yeah.
dreadlocks look and everything. And I think that's how I'm used to seeing him because he's appeared in a lot of comic books since John Romita Jr. first created him. But it's funny when I went back to look at some of the artwork that John Romita Jr. drew from his early appearances, he almost looked more like this one than that one. Like this guy's hair looks much more kempt,
Yeah.
not so unruly. I think this crazy unruliness looks more like the original John Romita, to be honest with you. And so even though like this guy is, I think, a nicer sculpt, and I think he does move better, and I think the issues with his tail and his feet aren't as pronounced as they were with this figure. It doesn't quite fix those problems. I think he's still going to be a bit of a struggle to display him, and I kind of wish he was a little bit more John Romita Jr. esque. I feel they cleaned him up a little bit too much. So, still a cool figure. And if I bought him alone for 30 or even $50 as a deluxe figure, I might be like, he's not perfect, but he's pretty good. But I had to buy a lot of lackluster figures to build that guy, and for him to not even really deliver, it's a little bit disappointing.
I would like his hair on his face.
Yeah.
I like that face a bit more. This one just looks too much like Predator to me.
Yeah, he definitely has a Predator vibe there. This one I wouldn't say Predator, but yeah, you're right. That hadn't occurred to me, but with the dreads and that shape of that face, it looks like Predator with his mask on.
Yeah.
All right, but that's it for the Build-A-Figure wave, but I still have a couple other guys to talk about, so why don't we move on to those?
Sure.
Okay, so one of the other figures I got was a 2-pack of Inhumans. Are you familiar with the Inhumans very much?
I know of them. I don't know too much about them.
Yeah, they're kind of like the Eternals.
Eternals, that's what I was thinking.
I don't know if anybody out there is like a huge Inhumans fan. Maybe they're like, to me, they just are this race of people that exist in the Marvel Universe. They're always around. They often appear in the Fantastic Four. One of the members, which I have here today, she actually was a member of the Fantastic Four for a while. They appear like whenever there's a big like event, these guys always like sort of show up. But they've never really done a very good job of being able to maintain their own book. I don't think the characters are interesting enough. Like when you look at a group like the X-Men, and you've got so many characters that people are like, oh, well, I like Wolverine, I like Colossus, I like Rogue, I like Nightcrawler. Like there's so many unique, cool characters. The Inhumans, in my opinion, almost none of them are very cool. Like I think the coolest one, which is the only other Inhuman I have in my Marvel Legends collection, this guy came out a few years ago. This is Black Bolt. But if you know anything about him, he can't talk. He has the power that as soon as he utters a word, he can like shatter mountains and stuff. So he's not the best comic book character because he can't ever say anything. So he's the coolest looking. I think he has a very cool kind of Jack Kirby-esque old school Marvel design in its simplicity, but even he's kind of boring. And then his wife is Medusa. She's the one with like living hair. They did do a Medusa figure a couple years ago as a Walgreens exclusive. We don't have Walgreens in Canada. I was never able to get that Medusa, but I thought it was a pretty bad figure anyway. I'm sure they'll probably do a better Medusa at some point. She's always drawn with like this big red crazy hair, but that one had like really flat red hair. It sucked. Another popular one, or actually I have another Inhuman. I have Karnak, but he's also a goofball. He's just a guy with a little pencil thin mustache and a big round helmet. And he's kind of a martial art expert. So Karnak is kind of boring. Then there's Triton, who's like a fish man. And then there's Gorgon, who is a Gorgon, who's just a guy with horse legs. Like none of them are great. But this here is Crystal. I like Crystal. Partly because she's one of the characters, at least as far as what I've read, she's been more fleshed out for me than some of the other Inhumans. because even though her design is rather bland, her name is really bland. It's not even a superhero name. Her powers are pretty bland. But at least she was a member of the Fantastic Four. She dated Johnny Storm. She's got just a little bit more personality than the other ones. And her costume, even though it isn't great, it's just like a simple design. It's this bright yellow. It's pretty different from most other superheroes. It stands out. Like we're looking at all my Marvel Legends across from me. There's not a whole lot of yellow in there. So like, and like the head sculpt is pretty and everything. Like it's a fine figure. As far as Crystal goes, this is probably the best Crystal figure that we're ever going to get. And I like it.
The hair drives me crazy though. The black looks like glasses.
Yeah, and that's the way she's designed. I don't know what is going on there. She's always had that weird pattern in her hair as if it's like a natural birth marker.
Weird.
Like,
that's so weird.
Like here, she came with an alternate head where her hair is flowing to the side. And you can see how it's like all oblong, that weird glass shape in her hair. I've never really understood it.
She kind of looks Mary Jane-esque.
Oh, she's a redhead. So yeah.
Orange head? Is that a thing?
Orange. Well, I think most redheads are orange heads, but I think compared to Mary Jane, she's got a lighter orange, a more true orange. So she's not a character that is particularly exciting, but if I had to do a list of like top 100 Marvel characters I still wanted a figure of, she might have made it onto that list.
Okay. Higher or lower?
She wouldn't be very high on the list. There's still a lot of Marvel characters. Despite the fact that I have literally hundreds, there are so many Marvel characters that they could still do that I would be excited about. Like just kind of obscure villains and completing some teams. And none of the Inhumans. Like if I didn't never get a Gorgon or a Triton, I won't lose any sleep. But Crystal might have been the one Inhuman. Same as I would like a nice Medusa. Those would be the ones that would maybe be on my list. Medusa would have been on my list before Crystal would have been, but they have already at least made a shitty Medusa. But anyway, her pack mate in the 2-pack was a little more interesting. So I don't know why, but the Inhumans, they can travel. They live on the moon, by the way. They can travel by way of a teleporting giant dog. And it seemed like a long shot that we would ever get an action figure of Lockjaw, the giant bulldog. But we got him. Because he would require like an all-new sculpt. You can't reuse this. Like, I don't know, maybe they could reuse this body for a bear or something, but like, there's no other giant dogs to make. And so this, he is to scale. If anything, he might be a little smaller than he's supposed to be, like compared to Crystal here. So you can see that he is almost as tall as her. I think in the comic books, he's sometimes drawn to actually be even taller. Huh. But I don't really need him to be any bigger. This is sufficient. And what do you think?
I mean, he's pretty cool. I am into animals. Like, missed opportunity for the mouth, though.
Well, they do. That's what I'm going to show you. So he does have some cool accessories. One of them being when his powers activate, that little tuning fork in his head, it cackles with energy. So you can pop that out and give him this like translucent blue piece.
Okay.
That's got a little bit of a Kirby crackle on it and everything, so that's a little cooler. Now, he does have some articulation in his paws, like his ankles essentially are articulated, but he doesn't have any knee articulation, which seems
weird.
This set wasn't cheap. In Canada, this 2-pack was $100. So I feel like, you could maybe give me some articulation in these legs. But they did give you these squatting hind legs. So you can pop his back legs off and put these on. So then he would,
like sitting.
Yeah, so his front paws don't bend, but you could have him sort of sitting with his butt down. So like that's all right. And he doesn't have an articulated jaw either, which seems like, why couldn't you give me an articulated jaw? But you see they gave you an alternate mouth or an alternate muzzle. It's like a nose and mouth. Now, that's kind of cool because you pop his snout off like so. God forbid I break something here. Urgh. Doesn't want to come off. There you go. So yeah, then you get this freakish looking dog with no face.
Oh God!
And then you can plug this other one on.
It's like Jabba.
Yeah. Oh, putting it on upside down. So there you go. Now you've got, I would say this is the cuter face. This is probably how I'll display him.
Yeah.
He's got his tongue hanging out. He looks cute.
Handsome little guy.
But maybe if now that you know it's there, like I think that seam, it kind of hides in his wrinkles, but I still see it and it's a little unsightly. Like, if you're going to go as far as to give me half of his face in a muzzle, couldn't you have just given me an alternate head? So I could either have the whole head with the mouth tongue out over there. Because, he's just got this whole seam around his like muzzle, which looks a little off.
It's more pronounced with this mouth than it is the other mouth.
Yeah. And it's also because you know it's there now.
Yeah.
Like, you might not have realized that before, but once you know that comes off, sometimes there's a little bit of a gap or something. And I don't know. It just seemed like a little bit of a cheap way out. Like, why didn't you just give him an articulated jaw and then his tongue could come out or whatever? So anyway, I'm happy I got him. His little tail. He's got a little articulated tail. It's cool. But this is another set of not super exciting characters, not executed 100% great. So, this is an episode full of just compromise.
I mean, he is cool.
Yeah.
Lockjaw's cool.
This last figure I have to show you, though, is really good. I've seen a lot of people commenting on it on Facebook stuff that this might be their toy of the year or their Marvel Legend of the year at least. It's not for me. I don't even know if it'll make my list. But that's almost more character-based than toy-based. I really need to like the character and the toy for it to really work for me. So this was a big deluxe figure. This is Odin. So this is Thor's father, as played by Anthony Hopkins in the movies. But I never really wanted I think they made an Anthony Hopkins figure.
I think they did.
I might even have him, to be honest. I don't remember. I think I do have him. But, Anthony Hopkins is just man-sized. So when you look at little Odin, he's the same size as Thor, or smaller than Thor. In the comic books, Odin is drawn to be a big, beefy, unrealistically wide and stout and girthy. And this action figure captures that. He is huge compared to Thor and Loki and stuff. He's big. I still feel like he's maybe a little too pricey for what he is, but
That's cool. A huge bitch.
That is a huge bitch.
Wow. No, this is... I can see why this would make figure of the year for some people.
Especially if you're a huge Odin fan, or even just if Thor's your favorite comic or something, they did him justice here. And so,
that cloth cape. Man, that's nice.
See, that's one of the things where I feel kind of dropped it a little bit, because I don't think this outfit, maybe it is exactly comic accurate, but to me it sort of feels like it's comic accurate. I don't know if it's based on any one particular look, but he's always worn multiple armors kind of like this. So I feel had probably had some artistic license to and that cape, it just feels a little flimsy given the size of him. I have some Mythic Legions figures that have a legit fur cape. And I feel he would have benefited from a wider cape.
100%. He'd be a full skin.
If he had a bare skin cape, or if this cape was at least wired so you could kind of pose it out so it would look wider than him. He's such a wide figure, you can't even really tell he has a cape on from the front because it hangs behind him. It's overtaken by his whole body. So the cape just feels a little flimsy to me. I feel that's one of the things that I don't love about this figure.
That is nice.
You can see he comes with a big staff. He comes with a big sword. A couple other cool things he came with is, even in the actual Norse mythology or whatever, Odin has a couple of ravens that offer him guidance. I have a Thor figure because in the comic books at one point Odin died and Thor had to take his place as the Allfather. And so I have the Allfather Thor figure, and he came with 2 little ravens to sit on his shoulders. This figure comes with the same 2 ravens. So you've got one with flapping wings and one that's kind of got his wings tucked away. If I had a complaint about these guys is they don't really have anywhere to go. You can kind of tuck their feet in under his kind of hairy, I don't know, shoulder piece there. But I kind of wish they had pegs on their feet so they could go somewhere or sit on his wrist or something like that. So again, they kind of missed the mark a little bit there, but it's cool that he comes with them. He comes with alternate hands. So he's got two closed fists and some gripping hands as well. But the other thing about this guy that's really cool is over the years, Odin's been portrayed different ways. I'm going to display him with this headpiece. This is the most Walt Simonson, big, elaborate headpiece, I think, of the whole thing. But you can pop this off, and it takes the whole furry shoulders and everything with it. You can put those back on. So yeah, this helmet comes with his hair. But you can display him with just his hair. I'm just going to take that off there for a second. So if you want him to go helmetless, he's got this like just long white mane of hair there, which is
it's nice, but yeah, for sure the helmet.
And if you want him to have a helmet, but maybe not quite so elaborate, a little more true to a Norse god or something.
Yeah, I like that one.
He's got this helmet with real like elk horns or something in there, and so it's a little more subdued, but it's still pretty big. So yeah, depending on how you like your Odin. And by the way, so you can see how the cape goes on. You could take the cape off if you wanted to, and just replace this. The cape is kind of held in place by this extra shoulder piece. But yeah, so that's it. So I think of all the figures I showed you today, Odin is by far the best one. He's the least disappointing. He's the only one that kind of really lives up to the hype. Although he wasn't cheap either, so you pay for what you get here.
How much was he?
I want to say he was up there. He wasn't quite $100, but I think he was maybe 80 or 90. So he's up there, and again, he's he doesn't have double jointed elbows and stuff. You lose some of that articulation because of how big and thick he is. I think it might have been difficult to give him that much articulation. But compared to all these other figures that have that nice articulation so they could reach back and touch their own elbows and their feet can come back and kick their own butts and stuff, this guy feels a little more stiff. He's just not as posable, but he sure does look nice up on the shelf. So there you go. That's it for my Marvel Legends. So sorry you didn't have a whole lot to talk about this time around.
That's okay.
But yeah, so why don't we wrap things up? So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, leave us comments below. All that engagement helps the channel, and it's very much appreciated. Anything else?
Who was the other nippler?
Oh, I thought maybe Blackheart would have nipples, but
okay.
But you could have commented on his lack of nipples.
Yeah.
If that's your jam, I don't know.
It's not. It just stuck out with Daimon.
You're pro nipple. You heard it here first.
Thanks for watching.
Ciao.
Keep collecting.